Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto, Willies.
Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. We are back again with a special guest, Thom Hartmann. Thom Hartmann is a New York Times best-selling author of over 30 books and the number one progressive talk radio show host in America for more than a decade. His show airs on Sirius XM, radio stations nationwide, and Free Speech TV. His Hidden History series addresses critical topics like guns, healthcare, the Supreme Court, democracy, voting rights, among others. His latest books in the series, The Hidden History of the American Dream, The Demise of the Middle Class, and How to Rescue Our Future, explores this erosion. Good afternoon, Senor Thom Hartmann. How are you doing this afternoon?
Hey, Egberto. It's always great to be with one of the best talk show hosts in America. It's such an honor to be on your program. You do such great work.
Well, look, my brother, I appreciate that. I mean, I use you as my guiding light because, again, I don't think there's another progressive that first of all, that knows the material like you do, that knows the history like you do, and that's able to do what you've done. And I can tell you, for all of us that are doing this work, you are the guy that we actually look up to. But you have this new book that's out, and I tell you, first of all, I love the series that you're writing. Tell us a little bit about this series before we get into the book specifically.
Yeah, my wife Louise had this idea like 15 years ago, and we had at various times pitched it to different publishers. Back in the day, I'm forgetting the name of Noam Chomsky. Sorry about that.
Yeah, remember
back in the day, Noam Chomsky had this, had written these incredible giant books on political philosophy and linguistics and all kinds of stuff. But everybody knew Noam Chomsky was really smart, but nobody really ever had read his stuff. And so one of these small publishing companies said, will you let us excerpt this? And they created a collection of 6 or 8 books that were all like 100 pages, more or less, by Noam Chomsky. And those books are what catapulted Chomsky into fame, but also they're the books that got his ideas out there in a big way. And so Louise's suggestion was, she called them rainy day books, that, we needed to come up with a series of books that are, a book that you can read on a rainy afternoon, a book that you can read in one day. Ideally less than 150 pages, and ideally, it's a pocketbook size, small. Mm-hmm. And so I finally found a publisher that was willing to buy the idea, which is Barrett Kohler. And I wanted to do it around American history. And so this is the 10th book in the series, and each book addresses a different aspect of American history. We always start out with guns, and we go to the war on voting, and we go to the American oligarchy and monopolies, and the hidden history of American healthcare, Big Brother, the hidden history of neoliberalism, the hidden history of democracy. That was the last one. And then this one is the hidden history of the American dream. And in each one, I want to drill down, like typically back to the founding of the country, sometimes even a little before that, and then bring it out to today, and then talk about how we can get to the places that we'd like to be with each one of these topics.
So what inspired you to do this particular one? Because I tell you what, it's coming out, I think it drops in October, correct?
Yeah, it drops the first week of October.
Right. And I think it's apropos because, again, especially now, America needs to hear this story, So what inspired you to do it and release it right now?
Well, we wanted it out before the election. It's not soon enough before the election, I don't think, to play a big factor in it. But these are issues that are being discussed right now. And the simple fact is that part of the political appeal of Donald Trump was that he was willing to point out in 2016, when no other Republican would point it out, and frankly, Democrats didn't want to talk about it either, that the neoliberalism, free trade, austerity, tax cuts for the rich, neoliberalism, which had been embraced by, the parade got led by Reagan and Bush. They signed the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trades, created the GATT, which led to the World Trade Organization. They negotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Bill Clinton signed it, but it was all written during the Bush administration, the first Bush administration. So this whole neoliberal idea was adopted by Reagan and Bush, but then Bill Clinton adopted it. The Democratic Party abandoned FDR and John Maynard Keynes's economics, and instead said, "Okay, we're going to go all in on Reaganomics and neoliberalism, with Hayek and company." And the result, and then Bill Clinton, and then George W. Bush, and then Barack Obama, and Donald Trump, all of them were embracing neoliberalism. But Trump was the first one to come out and say, we've got to reject at least some parts of this, specifically the free trade part of it. And he was right. He was absolutely right, that we do need to reject free trade. He did it in such a clumsy, ass backwards way, imposing these massive tariffs on China, that he basically started a trade war. And that's not how you put tariffs into being, but tariffs are important. And it blew up in his face. I mean, it really hurt America and hurt him. But he said it out loud. He was willing to call out his own party. And then Joe Biden, he didn't campaign on it, but he has governed by rejecting, by and large, neoliberalism. And, now they're breaking up these big companies. We just had this trial about Google here in Portland. I guess it's still ongoing. And there's several other, giant companies that they're looking at breaking up and blocking mergers, the Albertsons, Kroger thing. And this is like a major turning point in history that nobody's paying attention to, that all has to do with the viability of what we call the American dream. That is a strong middle class. And so I thought, this is the perfect time to write a book about it.
Now, it's interesting that you brought up Reagan, but before we get into there, I just want to clarify something about tariffs, right? Mm-hmm. While tariffs, I believe, are essential if you want to keep a manufacturing base that isn't governed by, let's say, a cheap labor force overseas to protect your own labor force, wouldn't you say that Trump did it in an unintellectual manner in the face that, let's say we go ahead and throw tariffs on clothes right now, given that we don't have a manufacturing base in let's say, textiles, et cetera, it's really a tax that would really hurt the middle class, given that, the rich don't care. They're going to get their Gucci and all that stuff anyway.
Yeah, by and large, at least the way Trump was doing it. I mean, keep in mind, we got on the tariff train in 1792. Mm-hmm. In 1791, Alexander Hamilton presented his 11-point plan for American manufacturers, sometimes referred to as the American Plan. And tariffs were the cornerstone of it. And, along with government subsidies for essential industries and building infrastructure like roads and things, and waterways, canals and things to transport goods. But tariffs were at the cornerstone of this. And tariffs became so important and as a way of bringing manufacturing to the United States. Up until the American Revolution, the British had laws in place that, like when George Washington was first inaugurated, or when General Knox rode up to his farm in Mount Vernon and said, you're now the president. Washington's number one request to General Knox, Henry Knox, was, please go to Connecticut to this guy, Daniel Hinsdale, who's running an underground fine clothing store, and have a suit made for me that I can be inaugurated wearing American-made clothing, because it was illegal to make clothing in the United States outside of homespun.
Oh, wow.
You could not make fine clothing in the United States in 1776 or 1791. Well, by 1791 you could, but you couldn't at the time of the American Revolution. It was a felony. It was against the law to make weaponry. It was against the law to make anything. Any kind of fine machinery. You couldn't make watches. You couldn't you could do clumsy things, but you couldn't do any of the fine stuff. It all had to be imported from England. And this was England's way of forcing the colonies to basically subsidize the British economy. So Washington asked Hamilton, how do we build an industrial economy here like England has over there? And tariffs were at the cornerstone of it. So from the George Washington administration until the Civil War, the revenue from tariffs funded 100% of the federal government, maybe 98%. Right. From the Civil War to World War I, tariffs funded 2/3 of the federal government. The average tariff in the United States from basically the late 1700s right up until the 1930s was around 25-30% in that neighborhood, depending on the goods.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then in Smoot, everybody says, "Oh my God, Smoot-Hawley made," which was a 2% increase in tariffs, 31 to 33% overall, and then everybody's like, "Oh my God, that made the Great Depression so much worse." Now it's BS. It had nothing to do with the Great Depression. It arguably made the trade wars worse, but that but in any case, then when Reagan came into office, average tariffs are probably running 15 to 20, 25%. Again, it depends on the goods. We've got 22,000 tariff categories over on the Department of Commerce's website. And Reagan's contribution to this, the neoliberal contribution, was do away with the tariffs so the big companies can just, and the result of that was that over the next 20 years, we lost 50,000 factories and 20 million mostly unionized manufacturing jobs. And China went from being one of the poorest third world countries in the world to having the wealth of a fully industrialized country. They're the second wealthiest country in the world right now. And on some days, they're right up there with us. And it's because our wealth got transferred to China. The way of, when Adam Smith wrote Wealth of Nations, the wealth that he was talking about was the output of manufacturing. He makes the point that if you have a tree limb laying in the ground in the forest, it has no value, at least in human economic terms. But if you apply labor and tools to it, if you take a knife and you carve it into an axe handle, you've now got something that you can sell. It now has an intrinsic value. And that value becomes part of the wealth of the entire nation. Because even if you sell that axe handle to somebody in China, they're giving you money equal to its value, and that money is staying here. Countries that manufacture generate wealth. Countries that import manufacturers from other countries lose wealth. And that's why there's been this $40-50 trillion transfer of wealth out of the pockets of average working people over the last 40 years. Much of it ended up in the money bins of the top 1%, but most of it ended up in China. And that's what, so if you're going to reimpose tariffs, so we went from having, all these tariffs from 1792 right up until the 1980s. And then now we're down to an average tariff of around 2.1%, across the board. If you're going to bring those tariffs back and get back to 10, 15, 20%, which is what it's going to take to reindustrialize America, you have to do it gradually, you have to do it thoughtfully, and you have to do it out in the open. Because what you're doing when you impose a tariff is you're asking entrepreneurs and big businesses to build factories. And no company is going to say, "Oh, gee, look at that. There's a 15% tariff on T-shirts. I think I'll build a new T-shirt factory," if they don't know that tariff is going to be there for the next 20 years, because it's going to take them that long to amortize the cost of that factory.
Right.
So when Trump comes along and just slaps a 20% tariff on something coming from China, and everybody in American business is going, "Yeah, he did that as an executive action. The next president will just undo it. I'm not going to invest in a factory. That's crazy." You need to do it with Congress. You need to do it thoughtfully. You need to do it publicly. You need to do it transparently. And particularly in those cases where you're dealing with countries that can be damaged by our imposing tariffs, like, for example, Bangladesh and their clothing industry. You want to go into Bangladesh and help them make the transition to a healthy domestic economy so that they can wean themselves off the need to have an export-driven economy, which by and large is what South Korea and Japan have done over the last 25, 30 years. And, poorer countries, Malaysia, Bangladesh, like that, could do it with our help. But this is a comprehensive policy that needs to be done. It's called an industrial policy. And, that's what Joe Biden has been doing. He's been promoting one. He doesn't call it that. Right. Kamala Harris, unfortunately, doesn't talk about it on the campaign trail, and she really should, because in the
let me ask you this, though. Do you think she can?
Do I think she can what?
Do you think she can talk about it without it being demagogued by the other side?
I do. In fact, I think she's making a big mistake. The newsletter that I got today from the Financial Times, from Rana Foroohar, however you pronounce her name, is one of the most thoughtful newsletters. It's worth the cost of the Financial Times subscription. And she points out that when Harris traveled in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, in each one of those states, when tariffs were brought up, she referred to them as sales taxes. And she's like, people in those states know damn well what a tariff is. And they know that when the tariffs went away, so did their factories. And they want those tariffs back. And she needs to start talking about tariffs, and she needs to talk about them in the context of an industrial policy, an intelligent, thoughtful, carefully done, multi-decade-long industrial policy to reindustrialize America, instead of just, blowing them off as sales taxes. And I think she's absolutely right. In fact, that's the op-ed I'm writing this afternoon.
No, and actually, I can see that the thing about it is so, if you can't say something in 2 words or 3 words in our current way of thinking, in a large percentage of the Americans' way of thinking, it's amazing how things are demagogued. And that is my only concern. Look, I agree with absolutely what you said about tariff, etc. Though I do say that in as much as, and tell me if you agree with this, in as much as Donald Trump is the one that said, yeah, we need to bring on tariffs, his goal is really to raise money for the Treasury so that he can reduce income tax for the wealthy. That's my thought, but I don't know.
Could be. I mean, the simple reality is that when a tariff is done correctly, it doesn't generate any revenue, because,
right.
Taxes have 2 purposes. One purpose is to raise revenue. The other purpose is to alter behavior.
Right.
We give people a discount. We let them, ignore taxes on the income that they use to pay for their mortgage. Why?
Right.
Because we want them to buy houses.
Yeah.
So the purpose of a tariff is to change the behavior of manufacturing companies in a country. And once they've changed that behavior, they're no longer importing goods and they're no longer paying tariffs.
Yeah, well, no, that I get that. It is interesting though, but you think through different levels of indirections that I don't think our former president does. And
no, I don't. But I do think people in the Midwest get this. And I grew up in Michigan. I know.
Yeah.
People in the Midwest understand this. You don't have to explain this. I'm talking about your average factory worker. They understand this.
Well, maybe you need to send a detailed letter to the campaign, to the Harris campaign.
Well, hopefully that'll be my Hartmann report tomorrow.
Yeah, you have some time to do it, because and explained as it was explained here, but it has to be, in my opinion, it has to be done in a easy to understand manner, because it is so, everything is so demagogued here. It is amazing. But anyhow, you said, why do you actually think, when it comes to the Gen Zers, we know what us older folks have done, etc. A lot of the Gen Zers think there's no hope. What do you tell them? What does your book tell them?
Well, we're facing challenges, no doubt about it. Climate change is probably the most existential of them, although world peace is another one. The nuclear war could end human life just as quickly as, probably much faster than climate change even. But that doesn't mean that there are not solutions. And I firmly believe, this is the other piece that I'm writing for Day After Tomorrow, that, I think that we need to revive the democratic peace theory. This idea that Francis Fukuyama was pushing in the late 1990s, that the neocons all, converged around, that democracies, generally speaking, don't go to war unnecessarily. The only time they go to war is in defense of themselves. And therefore, the more democracies you have in the world, the less war you're going to have in the world. And I think that's a solid notion, and it's something that deserves to be pursued. But the other thing I would say to young people is that, and for that reason, by the way, I think we need to be defending Ukraine, because, we need to defend democracies. But that, the other thing for young people is that if we can return to Keynesian economics, if we can go back to where we were before the Reagan Revolution, if we can go back to free college education, if we can go back to inexpensive healthcare, where hospitals and health insurance companies are required to be not-for-profit corporations, for example, as was the case in the 1970s. If we can reclaim some of those common sense things that we had for a long, long time in the United States, and we just really lost since the Reagan Revolution. If we can do those things, then we can really build a country that and rebuild our middle class. Our middle class hit its peak at about 2/3 of us when Reagan came into office, and then his job was to attack the middle class. That was literally what he was hired to do, was to take the middle class down a peg, because the intelligentsia, the Republican intelligentsia, felt that the women's movement, the civil rights movement, and the student anti-war movement were all the result of the middle class having too much wealth. Russell Kirk wrote about this in his book, The Conservative Mind, in 1951. And at first, all the Republicans, with the exception of Buckley and Goldwater, thought he was crazy. But then when the 60s happened, all the Republicans were like, ho, yeah, he was absolutely right. He was a prophet. And this middle class thing got too big, and we've got to cut it down to size. And that was Reagan's mandate. And, from the GOP. And he took us from 2/3 of us being in the middle class to 43% of us right now. And that, and which is the American dream. And so that's, a large part of what my book is about, is how that happened, how we got into this terrible situation, how so many of us got left behind, why it takes two incomes right now to sustain a lifestyle that's about 20% lower in quality than what one income could do in 1980. And, how we get back, how we can rebuild the American dream, rebuild the American middle class.
Now, Thom, what is it? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear what you say. What is in it to really decimate the middle class? What's in it for the others? Is it a bigger piece of the pie for a smaller group?
I think there's two different cross currents that intersect of opinion and motive. You've got some really, really rich people who are afflicted with a severe form of obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, known as hoarding syndrome. Mm-hmm. These are people who, if they were not born to wealthy families or did not have some big lucky break in their lives, would be living in an apartment with floor to ceiling tin cans and newspapers. They literally have that hoarding problem. Yeah. But because they were wealthy or born into wealth or acquired wealth, their hoarding is largely limited to, money in the bank, 700-foot yachts, mansions around the world, and girlfriends. But it's still hoarding syndrome. And so for people with hoarding syndrome, there's literally never enough, no matter how much there is. So you've got the problem of those people demanding tax cuts because they want more of whatever they're earning, on the one hand. On the other hand, I think that you have people who, in the Republican Party, conservatives, who really and truly believed what Russell Kirk wrote in 1951. And, prior to the 1930s, there had never been any country in the world where more than half of its population had been in the middle class. It had literally never happened. Because when you have unregulated capitalism, laissez-faire capitalism, you end up with the world that Charles Dickens wrote about in Christmas Carol. You end up with a very small top 1%, basically the royal family and their buddies, right, big industrialists, a very small middle class, which are the doctors, the lawyers, and the small business people. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, Ebenezer Scrooge ran a one-man company with one employee. That was a small business, and he was the middle class in England at the time. And then you've got this huge, bottom 95, 96%, which are the working poor. And England maintained that with maximum wage laws. Right up until the end of the 19th century, it was against the law to pay somebody more than a certain amount. We have minimum wage laws. England had maximum wage laws to prevent the emergence of the middle class. Edmund Burke wrote about this in the 1790s. And in fact, the title of Russell Kirk's book is The Conservative Mind, from Burke to Eliot, from Edmund Burke to T.S. Eliot. And so he was agreeing with Edmund Burke that if a middle class gets too large, it'll produce social instability, for the simple reason that the average middle class person, the average working class person really, who does not have a college education and did not come from wealth and affluence and does not have a lineage that includes people who held political power, just doesn't know how to govern. And to turn governance over to this large middle class would be a disaster. This was, Burke's theory. It was Kirk's theory. And like I said, from 1951, when he first published that, until around 1965, with the exception of William Buckley and Barry Goldwater, nobody really took it seriously in the Republican Party. But in the mid 60s, when the civil rights movement hit in a big way, when the women's movement hit in a big way, and then the student anti-war, anti-Vietnam War movement hit in a big way. And we had cities on fire. We had students in the streets being shot at by the National Guard. You had women, just speaking out loudly in ways that had just shocked the sensibility of these Republicans. They all of a sudden said, yeah, Kirk was right. Now, what do we do? Well, we've got to cut the middle class down to size. And that's what Reagan was elected to do. And that's what he did. The first thing he did was go after unions, because unions are the principal engine of the middle class. In his first month in office, he took down Patco, the professional.
I remember that well. Yeah, the airline pilots. Yeah. I mean, the air controllers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, he did that, and then he cut taxes on rich people and raised taxes 18 times on average working people. He put a tax on Social Security income. He changed the law to enforce the tax on tips. It just goes on, right? But the whole mission of the Reagan administration, the Reagan Revolution, was to take that middle class below 50% to produce social stability. Reagan himself talked about how he didn't think we should have free college in America, because why should I pay those brats, his phrase, to engage their, quote, intellectual curiosity, end quote, when they, quote, oppose my policies, end quote. And so, when he came in as governor of California had a completely free education.
University, the UC system was
one of the best in the world,
free,
and it was completely free. I had friends from Michigan who, instead of paying $200 a month or a semester to MSU, traveled out to California to go to college for free. And Reagan took that down, and then as president, one of the first things he did was he cut federal college education by 18%. In one of his first 2 years, and so it worked. Reagan did. So now we've got students $2 trillion in debt, and they're not protesting anymore like they used to, because they're afraid of getting kicked out of school and ending up, saddled with debt for the rest of their life, which is exactly what Kirk and Reagan, wanted. You've got, a women's movement that is in crisis right now with these abortion laws and whatnot. The Republicans trying to put women back in their place. I mean, Kirk's point was, young people won't know their place, minorities won't know their place, women won't know their place. And in fact, Kirk talked at some length about how you have to have classes and orders in society for society to operate properly. And of course, white educated men are at the top of the class in his mind. And so, we're refighting that battle. We're still basically fighting against Reaganism. And that's one of the major themes of my book. Although nobody will talk about it in those terms, because most people don't know the damn history.
Well, I mean, every time I speak to you, there's so much that I learn about, and I think that is why it's so important, and why it's so important to have these books. Before I go into homes as a commodity, I want to kind of prick your mind a little bit more with regards to the class system and billionaires, etc. Why is it that the people who do the work, we know that we do the work. The engineer knows that the intellect comes from them. The scientists know that the intellect comes from them. Why do we allow a rather not very smart group of billionaires to be the ones that control our economy, to be the ones that control our government, to be the ones? And what prevents us from saying, by the way, you couldn't really exist without us. You couldn't really be rich without us. What is it that's missing within our collective psyche that doesn't force that to be what we fight for?
I think the largest piece of this, Egberto, was 5, now it's 6 conservatives, Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court. They still believe what Russell Kirk wrote about. They still believe that you've got to have students terrified, that women need to know their place, that minorities should have a place in society that's below that of the majority. And that's why John Roberts gutted the Voting Rights Act. That's why they're going after your right to vote, in more general ways. That's why they said that billionaires and corporations can throw virtually unlimited amounts of money into political campaigns. They really believe, the argument that Kirk was making in his book, although he never used the word oligarchy to the best of my recollection. It's been a couple of years since I read his book, but the form of government basically that he was advocating was oligarchy, ruled by the rich. Mm-hmm. And a meritocracy.
Yeah.
A meritocratic form of oligarchy. And I wrote about that, the hidden history of oligarchy, American oligarchy. But basically, this is a classic case of, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, that so many of these guys who are promoting oligarchy like this, and particularly those on the Supreme Court, actually believe it's a more stable form of government than democracy. They don't genuinely believe in democracy. They're very skeptical of democracy. They often refer to it as mob rule and things like that. So anyway,
it seems like the mob need, in my humble opinion, maybe it's time for us to get a little mobbish, if you will, because I mean the idea of a few billionaires who, look, I'm an engineer, you know what you do. I mean, and it behooves me that it behooves me that I hear about Elon Musk having a suborbital flight or a flight a couple of 100 miles above the Earth. And it's a great thing. I was working at NASA in the 90s when we put things out much further than that. But somehow he's doing a great thing because he's a billionaire. The silent folks that worked for Boeing Aerospace and Lockheed and all of that really did some work that he's built upon. Nothing is said about that.
Well, but anyway, and he bought Tesla too. He didn't.
Right.
I mean, he's had some very successful acquisitions, and he started some things. I mean, as an entrepreneur, he's a smart guy. As a human being,
but what I always talk about is, when we define entrepreneur, right? I mean, as an entrepreneur, he's a smart guy. I usually say as a capitalist, he's a smart guy. Yeah. But but as far as producing something of value, debatable. But you actually said something that really tickled me. Not tickled me. Whetted my taste buds. Homes as a commodity. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, in the couple minutes we've got left here, let's dig into that.
Yeah.
There are some things that I think should not be commodified, should not be treated as commodities. They should be treated as essential aspects of our nation, of our ability to function as people. I include education, I include healthcare in those categories, I include food in those categories, and housing. Many other countries protect housing. They don't allow foreign people to buy housing in their countries. They subsidize low-income housing. I mean, there's virtually, for example, in Singapore, which is not, an ideal democracy by any stretch, but in Singapore, there's basically no housing. There's no homelessness. I mean, if when there's more people, they build more houses. Yes, it's somewhat of a demand, top-down government, but when after the housing crisis in 2008 with the the Great Bush Crash. And we had all these homes on the marketplace, particularly those that were being foreclosed on by people like Steve Mnuchin, who, foreclosed on 30,000 families, I guess, threw them out of their houses. And suddenly there were all these cheap houses. I believe it was Goldman Sachs, it might have been JP Morgan Chase, issued a white paper on how housing could be the next great commodity, the next great investment, the next area that investors should be looking at. And what came out of that is several hedge funds and a couple of big investment houses started funds and started companies to specifically buy up single family homes across the United States for cash and turn them into rental properties. And in some towns, as much as 50% of all the single-family homes in the community are now owned by these corporate landlords. And they collaborate with each other. They collude with each other. The Biden administration is talking about breaking this up. They've got this software program that's making it easy for them.
Yes.
And they end up jacking up prices. And so much of the housing affordability, I mean, there are 14 million empty homes in America right now. There are 700,000 homeless people in the United States. What do those numbers tell you? It's like there's something fundamentally wrong here.
Yes.
Yeah. Using houses as an investment. I get it. If when I was coming up, I had some friends who, in our 20s and 30s, back in the 70s and 80s, you could make enough money to buy a house. Housing was cheap and salaries were good. And I had friends who, instead of buying a house and then selling it when they moved to the second house, they'd hang out of that first one, buy the second one, and rent out the first one. And several of those friends have done very well. They're not rich, but, they now have assets that are generating money for them. I have no problem with that. But when you've got a company coming into a town with a bag full of cash or cashier's checks representing 20 or $30 million and just buying houses sight unseen at auction or buying them for cash the minute a house hits the market and pricing everybody else out of the market, you're messing with the lifeblood of a country. You're messing with the ability of people to have the American dream, frankly. And we need to outlaw this. We need to, and the way to do it is with tax policy. You just eliminate all tax breaks for anybody who owns more than, say, 4 houses, period. And then you also, I would argue that we need to adopt a law that says that if you are not a U.S. citizen and you own a housing property in the United States, you must live in it. And if you don't live in it, then you can't own it. It's just that simple. And it can be your investment, but you got to live here. And
exactly.
We would not be unique in that. And many of the developed countries of the world do this.
I mean, that sounds good. Look, what should I have? I mean, we're going to tell people how to get your book in a minute, but what should I have asked you that I didn't?
I can't think of anything. You're so good, Egberto.
Okay, well, I don't know about all of that, but let me just say, folks, the name of the book is The Hidden History of the American Dream, the Demise of the Middle Class and How to Rescue Our Future. All the links for the book will be accompanied in the book, in the video, and everywhere else. It drops on, I believe, October 8th, if I recall. It's a book like every one of Brother Hartmann's book that should be gotten. Like I said, every time he comes on the program, I get an education. And every time you listen to Thom, you get an education. If we could have more people on here like him, it would be great. Anyway, Thom, look, it's been my pleasure to have you once again on Politics Done Right. Anything you want to say before we close?
Thank you so much for having me with you, Egberto. It's always such a pleasure and an honor to hang out with you.
You have a wonderful rest of your day, my friend.
Thank you. You too.
Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. Today, I am honored to speak with Guerline Jozef, who is with the Haitian Bridge Alliance, Black Immigrants Bail Fund, and the Cameroon Advocacy Network. Wait a minute.
Yes.
You're a busy woman.
I am, and I am a Black woman in America. I am a Black immigrant woman in America. And when we see what's happening and really trying to bridge the gap and bringing people together when it comes to immigration, human rights, and our humanity, so we have to be busy. We don't have the luxury to not be busy.
Now, let me tell you something, okay? Because this is what got me. I'm watching the immigration debate right now, and Haiti plays a part in this immigration debate. And the specific way in which Haiti plays it is that, unlike some immigrants from Europe, Haiti is being treated differently. What I'd like you to express and talk about, a lot of the issues that we have in Haiti, why we have a lot of displacement, why a lot of people are coming here, is actually because of U.S. policy, economic policy in Haiti.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Tell America why they should be careful in the way they express the immigration issue, because all it does is points a finger at bad policy.
Exactly. And what you said is literally at the heart of it all. Mm-hmm. And when we see Haiti, for example, has always been a receiving country. Right? Haiti has helped the Jews, you name it, we've done it. We've helped. That's what we are known for. But at the turn of the 1960s, 1970s, due to U.S. policies into Haiti, putting government in place in Haiti that was in the best interest of the U.S., started seeing the first real big wave of migration out of Haiti into the U.S., and then you started hearing of the boat people out of Haiti. And when we see under the presidency of Duvalier, we saw the first wave of Haitian migrant. What did the U.S. do? The U.S. created the modern immigration prison system right now by starting in Guantanamo Bay putting Haitians there and then move them into places like Rome and then creating a whole industry around caging of Black people, specifically immigrants from Haiti. Now we are looking at today what's happening in Haiti, the new wave of immigrants from Haiti, and you can also trace it right back to U.S. foreign policy in Haiti. And when you talk about the economy, you saw how Clinton himself came and apologized for creating the economic downfall of the entire country because they had excess rice in Arkansas and they needed a place to dump it, and the dumping ground was Haiti, completely destroyed the rice industry, the rice farming industry, creating famine
and mass
displacement, creating what we continue to see today.
And that's what most don't know. You know, everybody likes to look at Haiti as a basket case. It is not. From the time Toussaint Louverture freed that country, it's been under attack, both from having to pay for their own freedom to France, to many other issues. So I'm happy to have you here to talk about Haiti, because too often the narrative that we hear in the United States doesn't have the intellect behind it that points out that the problem. I mean, farmers in Arkansas need to open their hearts and say, Haiti, thank you.
We are responsible for
your
happening.
Success.
Yes.
We are responsible that you had where to send your rice and have your rice paid for. So that was a transfer of wealth from Haiti to America,
yes.
From Haiti to the South,
yes.
From Haiti to Arkansas.
Yes.
So what you are looking at there is nothing more than what was created by United States policy. And previous to that, what was created by French policy. So continue explaining to us these different types of things that are creating what we're seeing today.
Yes. So we can go back to 120 years ago, understanding that Haiti is the second country in the Americas after the United States.
Right.
But Haiti is the only country that was created out of the Black revolt.
Exactly.
When you have people of different tribes in Africa, and what they were doing is that if you misbehave in the South, in North Carolina, in Virginia, you will be shipped to Haiti because that was where the harshest conditions were.
Right.
You misbehave in Jamaica, you misbehave in Panama, you misbehave wherever in the Americas, you end up being sent to Haiti to be corrected, to be fixed. But the mistake that they made was by bringing all the folks who are really freedom fighters into one place, we give birth to the new world.
Exactly.
We give birth to what we know today as what we see. And we say Haiti is the mother of the new world. And because of that, I want to bring us back to Frederick Douglass. When he was the first envoy from the U.S. to Haiti, when he came back, and during the World Fair, and he was giving report back on his experience in Haiti, and understand the relationship between Haiti and the United States, and Haiti and the powers of the world, he said, the world, i.e. the United States, will never forgive God himself for allowing Haiti to be Black.
And you know that what is so interesting about that, also there was always the fear in America that Haiti would be the template, the fear in Brazil that Haiti would be the template, the fear in Jamaica that Haiti would be the template.
And that is, and it was, and it continues to be.
Right.
And we also have to remember, even the South and Central America, Haiti was not only pivotal in the liberation of the entire continent, but Haiti provided the food, the arms, the money, the people, until Simon Bolivar.
Exactly.
When we are providing everything for you, But when you go with my support and liberate what became Gran Colombia, you have to make sure that the Black people are also freed.
Right.
You don't have to repay Haiti anything other than really continue the fight for freedom of all people.
Right.
So, as you mentioned, now you have Portugal completely, shook.
Exactly.
That now we have Brazil, and Portugal was one of the biggest enslavers.
Right.
And now you not only have the French that's fighting Haiti, you have Portugal, you have the British, you have the French, you have
the U.S. It was the entire Western world that needed to make sure that this revolt, because they wanted to maintain.
Happened.
And this is what's not, people talk about they don't want to teach critical history, or they don't want to teach any of these things. And this is the reason why, because when the truth comes out, what really happened, normal, moral people with empathy understand that the only thing we're looking at was people looking for freedom like what everybody else wants.
For freedom.
They're not asking for anything from anybody. They just want freedom to be able to have equal access to success.
Yes.
And that's what's important in this movement. It's important the work that you do with your head lifted high, that people understand nobody here is asking for a favor. Everybody just wants equal access to success. And when you have a group called the Haitian Bridge Alliance, the Black Immigrants Foundation, this is not about division. This is about bringing people together.
Yes, because in Haiti we say "un pile main chai palou," which means many hands lighten the load, right? Which means l'union fait la force, which means bringing ourselves together.
Exactly.
And the reality is Haiti continues to pay for all people.
Right.
The United States put a 60-year embargo on Haiti.
Yes.
And then they invaded Haiti.
Yes.
And then
More than once.
And when they did the first invasion, they took out everything that was left.
Well, I mean, that is...
And brought that into the U.S. and brought that into Citibank.
Yes.
Citibank, as we know today, was created and built by the Haitian money that the United States literally went into Haiti and took out.
It's the same thing that was done in Cuba. It's the same thing that was done in the Dominican Republic. We have to understand that the history that we learn here is only a partial history to the person who has been for so long the oppressor.
Yes.
And when that is, and this is not to blame individual folks. This is just to say, this is what your corporatists, this is what your capitalists, this is what these people did. Yes. And what we're seeing coming across the border is only the natural result of policies that has occurred throughout time.
Yes, yes.
And when that is understood, we can actually have sensible policies.
Absolutely, and really centering that into the humanity, centering that into the false narrative of othering. And what you said is understand that our privilege that we have here is only because enslaved people decided no more.
Exactly.
Enslaved people said, you know what? I am a person. I do not belong to you.
Exactly.
And that create the ripple
friction
effect that we see today, that you and I can come into the front door. And you and I can sit here as Black people, as immigrants in this United States of ours, to be able to speak on behalf and with this authority.
Because the truth is, the U.S. was built on the entire Western region. The bauxite from Jamaica, the plantains and the yuccas and the other minerals from Haiti, the copper from Panama.
Yes.
All of these are corporations extracting from these countries and with no recompense.
Here. Yes.
And it's done, and the riches come here.
Yes.
These are things, and it's not that the technology isn't there for all to use. So anyway, look, give me a closer, Miss Jozef.
I will say that in 2024, where we find ourselves, when it comes to immigration specifically, we have to understand the root causes of migration. We have to understand that immigration is a Black issue, is a social issue, is a racial issue. We must continue to push against the false narrative of what we are, who we are, and believing that we are stronger together. Whether my ancestors was in Haiti, in Panama, in the Dominican Republic, in Cuba, in Colombia, we are related to the ancestors of the people in the South, in Louisiana, in
North Carolina, the Gullah people.
We were separated. And what I continue to do is call for a diaspora reunification.
Exactly.
Because we were separated doesn't mean we are no longer family. We just need to come back to ourselves.
Guerline Jozef, it's been
so
my
much.
pleasure to speak with you.
It's an honor.
Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thank you so much.
Donald Trump says he's going to start on day one the deportation, the disruption to get people out of the country. And now California farmers are starting to get worried because California produces about 25% of all our goods. And the kind of work that's required to produce all those vegetable goods, plant goods, etc. The truth of the matter is, no matter what you pay, you can't get Americans to do that kind of work. You know, again, we've moved away from training people to do all kinds of works because we have exported everything and we have imported all kinds of things to solve what we've learned or taught people not to like to do anymore. And what that means if Trump is successful in starting this deportation, look, I mean, he's going to destroy his own administration by doing this, right? Because again, what's going to happen is it's going to be that prices are going to go through the roof because there's going to be, like happened in Georgia when they started getting rid of people, and like happened in Florida, the construction industry is just about destroyed because of the immigration issue. And in Georgia, the peaches are left on the ground because of the immigration issue. It's about to happen throughout the country, assuming Donald Trump doesn't get paid off to just give a facade of throwing people out. Because remember, the man is a con man. I had on my show yesterday where I said, I am not really sure that the deportations are going to occur as you think. I think they're making a big hoopla out of it right now, and they are going to round up a few criminals that they call criminals to make a big picture out of it. And in the background, I think they will be taking bribes. And these are the bribes that they're going to take, in my opinion. This is opinion, folks. I separate opinion from facts. I separate opinions from facts. What I'm giving you now is an opinion, not a fact. It's an opinion. All right. My opinion is the following. Donald Trump is going to get paid off for the private sector to create detention centers. And that's going to be used as a cost center to enrich a few, to lock up a whole lot of folks that they can somehow say you're a criminal, or that doesn't have a marginal effect on our agricultural sector, where we actually need a lot of labor. So I think they're going to give a big hoopla to show that they're locking people up because they think you want to see that. They think you want to see us harm those immigrants that came over the border looking for a better life, that you want to get rid of them, that you hate them, that you want to do the non-biblical thing, that when Jesus said open your hearts to these people, you know, the evangelical Christians have said otherwise, against the Bible, of course. But you are going to want to get rid of those people, and they think that you want to see those people on buses and kicked and thrown into these detention camps. That's what they think you want to see, and they're going to make you see that. So they're going to enrich quite a few people by showing you that they can be evil to those others, those people that walked across the border, number one. Number two, in the background, they will be taking bribes from the big agricultural industrialists. Hey, turn a blind eye, guys. Turn a blind eye. Let my people work and get the crop out. Turn a blind eye. I'll donate to your campaign. I'll donate to the RNC. I'll do all these things. Anybody doesn't think the possibility exists that this deportation machine is not about destroying the agricultural sector, because that is like hurting yourself, but to be in a position to bribe, to profit on somebody else's back. The typical thing the capitalist does. That is what again, folks, that particular part of my narrative is not fact. The first part was fact. This part is opinion. We'll see if it occurs. So again, we told you so. We told you these are the machinations that were going to happen. And as we just showed from all reporting, it has started. His administration has not yet started, but you have to come into the administration with policy. And the policies that are out there are saying he wants to maintain the tax cuts, and he has to find the monies from somewhere because, again, the deficits and the way the financial sector is set up, he has to find the money somewhere. And that money comes from whom again? From you. All those benefits that you get, that adds up, and they have to get it from you. So my brothers and sisters in Appalachia who overwhelmingly supported Donald Trump, remember, you are the poorest part of this country. You are the ones receiving the most food stamps and other support from our government. And it is you who will be paying the price to ensure that these wealthy politicians or these wealthy industrialists, wealthy capitalists, wealthy oligarchs continue to get the tax cuts that they have gotten. And for all of you who said, hey, I voted for Donald Trump because he said he was going to not tax my tips. Let me remind you, if you've ever filled out your 1040 form or your 1040 easy or whatever, guess what, brothers and sisters? Your tips weren't taxed anyway. That was a promise not worth the money it was stated on. And let me tell you why your tips was never ever taxed. Your tips weren't taxed because every American citizen gets I think it's a $23,000 write-off up top, deduction up on the top. On your top line. And unless you make so much in tips that it pumps you into the $60,000 to $70,000 category of income, you didn't pay taxes on your tips anyway. So it was a promise that sounded good, but here's where the promise makes sense. When Kamala Harris said, I am going to also not tax tips, she made sure to talk about it being for service workers. But she made sure that stockbrokers couldn't use it. But guess what? The no tax on tip is just another leverage from the parasites that do no work in our economy. Not the server who serves you your platter at the restaurant, but for the guy who said, I am going to start making the income that I earn from helping you with your stock, from being your financial planner, that's now going to be a tip. Will you give me a tip? They didn't put a limit on the tip, and now I get a new tax break for millionaires. Folks, we continue to be played. And as long as we allow ourselves to be played, we'll continue to get played. Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It. As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto, Willies.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you.